Hey, John, how are you doing today? Such a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here too. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. I remember a couple of initial conversations that we had, and they left me with something to ponder on. And I've started to implement a lot of things that you taught me the last time.
Well, thank you. I'm glad they've been helpful.
So, John, let's start with your initial years when you started working with the Rockefeller Foundation. And I'm sure you would have worked with multi-billionaires at that point in time. So tell me and share a couple of experiences while you were working with the Rockefeller Foundation.
After failing out of college the first try, or failing out of university the first try, I graduated number 3 in the entire United States in my major, and was hired directly out of university to go to work for one of the Rockefeller Foundations. And I had 4 billionaires on my board, and everyone else was worth more than $100 million. So I was 23 or 22 when I joined the foundation, and at 26 I became CEO. And the most important thing I believe I learned from working with the billionaires, well, 2 things is many of them were very, very, very nice people, just as friendly as could be. You go to their house, can I get you something to drink, John? Can I make you a sandwich? I wasn't expecting people worth, billions of dollars to be that friendly and outgoing and nice and pleasant to be around. On the other side, they were extremely demanding from a business standpoint.
I'm sure.
I was doing a workshop the other day with a client we were doing. He was talking about how much it cost to have all of his senior team in for a 90-minute meeting. And for him, it came to about $300,000 when he took the hourly rate and the benefits and everything to have his entire management team in one place. It must have been in the millions and millions to have these folks flying from all over the world for a 3-day retreat.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to waste a minute of time. And if you weren't ready, they knew it right away and held you accountable.
So that's one of the key learnings that you had then.
Yeah, is 5 minutes early is 10 minutes late, and be 10 times more prepared than you need to be, and everything should be okay.
I'm sure. So you've worked with Rockefeller Foundation. It's one organization that people would give their life to. And I've heard so many good stories about Rockefeller Foundation, the kind of learnings that you go through. And from there, being the CEO of, and I'm sure that you must be one of the youngest CEOs the Rockefeller Foundation would have it.
Yeah.
Being the CEO, and then coaching happened to you. How did coaching happen to you?
After I'd been there for several years, the particular part of the Rockefeller Foundation I worked directly for Winthrop P. Rockefeller III in his foundation, it began to be very critical. And I was going back and forth to Washington and dealing with senators and congressmen, excuse me, and I had a really talking to people who were lying to me, who would look right in my face and say something I knew wasn't the truth. So my own value system, my highest value personally is honesty, and I just couldn't take it anymore. So another gentleman had been chasing me to become the CEO of his business, and it was a global sales strategy and strategic planning firm. And I went there at about 34 years old and worked for a couple of years. And then again, I had a values mismatch with the owner of that company, and I left to go out on my own. So I became a coach literally because my clients, my training clients, or the people I was doing strategy with, started to request, could you come and help me with these other things, or could you get me up to speed on this topic? So I just sort of fell into it. And the interesting thing is, when I started coaching, mostly companies would hire me to try to fix their broken employees. When someone was struggling or about to get fired or had a problem, they'd say, John, will you coach him, and try to get him back on track. And I learned early in my coaching career that you can't fix other people if they don't want to be fixed.
Yeah.
So I had my first involvement in coaching was not pleasant, because it was constantly not fighting, but friction between me and them, because the other person didn't want to change. They didn't want to coach. So that's how I got into it. And eventually I realized if I coached really good people who wanted to get better, that was a lot of fun.
I think that has been one of your mantras, that always work with people who are really willing to work on themselves and see the magical results that you can and help them produce that.
Exactly.
And John, you're one of the most celebrated business coaches that I know of. Now, in fact, that's how I reached out to you. that the other day I was in an ICF conference and I met 3, 4 people, and coincidentally, all of them were talking about you. And the other day I was in another cohort where we were discussing how the coaching world is shaping up and what is it that we could do. And there's this person, once again in the past, I said, hey, by any chance, do you know John Spence? And I said, I've heard this name. And then I could really connect dots. So the other day also in that conference, somebody was mentioning about this gentleman, John Spence. So you are one of the most celebrated business coaches in the world. You're an author of, I guess, 5 books. What is your philosophy of coaching, and especially in business? When you're working with your client, when you're working with the CEOs of the few of the top organizations in the world, what has been your philosophy?
I think I take a different approach than a lot of coaches do. I'm mainly what I call a business acumen coach. 85% of my work is helping someone get better at a specific topic. Usually, the first engagement when people bring me in is either leadership or strategy. They want to become a more effective leader or strategy. And the methodology I use is basically like a professor. I give them homework, I have articles for them to read, I do case studies, all of that. And let's just say we pick a topic, strategic thinking. We'll spend 6 months of me assigning work, us discussing it, pushing each other, and then I will give them a final assignment to teach strategic thinking to me. From their philosophy, everything they've learned, everything I've taught them, everything we discussed, I want you to make a presentation with slides and everything back to me with your frameworks and how you plan to use strategic thinking in your business. And there's the couple powerful things is there. I haven't told them what strategic thinking is. I've given them a lot of background, a lot of advice or experience, but they create their own view. So they own it. The other thing is, and you and I chatted about this in the past, is because I bring all these articles and documents and books, we can have a really strong discussion about the information and they can disagree strongly with it. I really don't like this. They don't disagree with me. We disagree about the material, which takes all the pressure off of it. We can have a really robust discussion about an idea without having any friction or tension between the two of us.
Makes sense. Yeah. And in fact, this is exactly what I leveraged last time you told me this. And one of the assignments that I'm onto, I use this and it helped. And then we started talking about one of the themes that this person was talking about. This person was talking about, coincidentally, again, managing stakeholders. And he read something about stakeholders and I shared a couple of articles. And then we had a wonderful discussion around that. And as you mentioned, that don't take a stand for anything, this is right and that is wrong. I just held the space for this person. And then I could see a lot of insights coming from him, from the context that he's dealing with, from the world that he's coming from. And he could actually connect everything because he is living in the environment that he's dealing with. And that opened up a new realms of possibilities, not only for him, but for me as well. So thank you so much for that insight.
My pleasure.
So John, how do you phase out your coaching engagement?
We typically go in a 6-month engagement. We meet every 2 weeks for about 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm on call 24 hours a day. So if a client has an issue or a challenge, or something happens in their business, they want to bounce it off me. A senior manager makes a big mistake and they want to know how to handle it. Things like that. That's typically what I get a call on. That's what we go. And then we just keep rolling it out 6 months as long as they want to. If at any time, and I've told my clients this, if you're not learning anything or you're not having fun, just let me know and I'll do the same. If I'm not learning and I'm not having fun, then we probably shouldn't be working together. I also tell all my clients, I know there's going to come a day when I won't have anything else to teach you. So I want you to feel comfortable now that when that comes, I'm not going to be unhappy or sad. It's part of this. We'll still be friends, but the paid relationship of me teaching you, there'll come a day when that doesn't work anymore. And let's just be comfortable with that and know there's no stress around that. And I've had a couple clients take a pause. So I don't want to quit, but I want 3 months off. I got to go do some other stuff. Then they come back.
Yeah. So has it ever happened with you that somebody has fired you or you have fired anyone for the lack of any other good word?
Yes. Not very often. I did get fired once when I was working with a senior executive on the culture of their company, and I did a survey of all 400 employees, and it was a 10-point scale, and they didn't get above a 2 anywhere. And the senior executive didn't believe it. I mean, he's just didn't think. So I called together a meeting of the entire company and put up the survey results in front of everybody in the entire company. You're a 2.1 here, you're a 1.3 here, you're a 4. So these are some of the lowest scores I've ever seen. And they had security escort me out right at the end of my talk. I was terminated in front of I'm in the middle of talking. He's like, "You're fired." Okay.
Yeah, really? Was that the case?
Yeah,
Wow.
right in the middle of the talk. He's like, "You're fired." So, but that again, we keep talking about that. That was a values choice for me. There's all these employees, and the senior management team doesn't believe there's any problems at all, and the employees are telling me it's horrible here, and a bunch of us are thinking about leaving, or we're afraid the company's going to go out of business. And I can't let all these people, struggle like this and be in pain. And they need they can't, if you can continue to work, it's just going to crush your soul. So I thought it's better for me to be sacrificed and get the elephant out on the table than it is for these folks to go on, drag on for more, months or years working at a place they hated. I also have had one client that in the process of working them, I realized they were doing something illegal, and I quit, and then we sent back all the money that they had paid us.
Yeah.
So just said, we don't want it, and this isn't what we're going to be involved in. Again, our values don't match your values.
So that has played a very vital role as far as your life as a CEO or as a coach is concerned. The values have played a very vital role in your life.
Yes.
And I remember last time also when we were speaking, I could really sense that there are a certain set of values that you really stay true to. And no matter what's happening in your life or in your business, let's value those values. So I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that.
There's a great quote from Walt Disney, crazy place to get it. When values are clear, decisions are easy.
Yeah.
Both on a personal level and a business level. It's, on a personal level, you can make even the most difficult questions by just saying, do these align with my personal core values?
Yeah.
And usually the answer becomes obvious pretty darn quickly, and you know how to make. Same thing in an organization. And does this align with the values, the vision, mission of our organization? If so, let's go in this direction. If not, let's go this way.
Let's part ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, John, help me understand. You have been working with few of the top leaders in the world. And in fact, I remember the last time when we discussed about the CEO of a very well-known organization. So I'm not going to, for the sake of confidentiality, I'm not going to name that organization.
Thank you.
And recently, you have been named as one of the most influential people in the world, and where you have been ranked with the who's who of the world, whether it's the top executives of Google or top executives of Facebooks are concerned. What do you think? What has been your greatest strength as a coach that has served you to reach where you are and to become the person that you have become?
Okay, this is interesting. It's a skill I've always had, but as a coach and a business person, I've developed it to sort of be what people know me for, which is taking complex things and making them simple. And I do that through pattern recognition. You'll see behind me a few books. I read about 100 to 120 business books a year, and I have every year since 1989. And people say, how many books on leadership have you read? Probably 100, maybe 200. And don't they get redundant? And I go, they do. And that's the best part, is if I can read 100 books on a topic and all of the authors say basically the same 5 or 6 things, then I feel at least I've got the thread that runs through that theme, that business. Then I take that and create frameworks and ideas around it. So I'm constantly trying, and this is what I do for people. I help people I coach. You said connect the dots. For me, it's what's the pattern? What are the things that keep coming up over and over and over again? And if we can identify the pattern, we can deal with it better.
Yeah, if you can identify the pattern, you can deal with that better.
Strategy or business or people or personal life.
Yeah.
In business, your strategy is your ability to recognize patterns in the marketplace before your competition does. And if you can see the pattern, then you get market advantage. You can bring a product to market faster. You can go in a new market. You can change your pricing, whatever it is. So really good strategic thinkers are actually fantastic at identifying patterns before their competition does.
So true. And John, what do you think? What is one or two are the major challenges which most of the leaders are going through or they are facing in their own journey?
Yeah, every business I've ever worked with anywhere in the world, which is a lot of places, communications across the organization at every level. The inability to have difficult, awkward conversations, inability to have conversations around accountability, which is really number two, is how can we be frank and speak with vulnerability and honesty and candor without offending each other, which allows us to make really difficult decisions. And then how do we hold each other and the whole entire organization fully accountable for implementing those ideas? That's, if you add, the only other thing I would add in is, and I look for the pattern. And out of all the organizations I work with, there's three major things that I see as a problem. Number one is lack of a vivid, compelling, and well-communicated vision and strategy for growth.
Yeah.
Number two is lack of courageous communication, and lack of three is disciplined execution. Biggest challenges by far I face in every client I work with.
Yeah. So compelling vision, communication strategy, and holding people accountable.
Yep.
Yeah, this reminds me of the kind of work Ram Charan has done, in fact, in his book called Execution by Larry Bossidy. And I remember
very, very well.
Absolutely, I'm sure. I remember listening to Ram Charan almost like a decade back in India. Was absolutely a feast to my ears. And in just 1 hour, I learned so much, and the kind of stories that he had to share, the kind of examples that he had to share, and the kind of connection that he could build with us, and the kind of humbling background that he comes from. There are certain commonalities between if you're doing business on the roadside or you are running a multi-million-dollar business or a multi-billion-dollar business. So he could actually draw certain parallels out of that.
The way I always tell people is just more zeros. That a small to medium-sized business, a 3-person shop, it roughly usually has about the same problems as Apple. It's just a lot more zeros.
Yeah.
I'm not much of a life or a personal coach, but I'm sure that you see a pattern and other coaches see patterns, that there's 3 or 4 or 5 things that pretty much every time you engage with someone, you're likely going to have to touch on these topics. Am I right?
I'm with you on that. I mean, the kind of work, when I work with executives in organizations, there are certain behavior patterns that we tend to, we observe for some time, and then we recognize that. And then I bring it on the table. I said, hey, this is what I'm observing right now. I'm not sure if it's making sense. And that's where the penny drops and say, hey, I never thought about that. I never looked at my life from that lens. And that's where we tend to start into the assumption that the other person is operating from. And when you are saying that one of the biggest challenges that a leader faces is communication, that's something that I would like to communicate to my team members, or as simple as I would like to fire somebody, and yet I would just reserve my own expression so that I should not feel bad, or it might not hurt the other person, or I might not be recognized as a harsh leader.
Exactly.
And the question is, at the cost of what?
The organization and all the other people around them.
Precisely. So John, I'm sure when you are saying that you work with people who are willing to work on themselves, so what do you think, what are the few common denominators in all the effective or so-called successful leaders that you have worked with?
I appreciate you asking this question, because I think it's something important for all of us to learn. The first thing is they're incredibly curious. They're constantly learning, reading, studying. As I said, I assign books for them to read. I assign articles. They will read all that and then more, and then watch a video, and then listen to an audiobook. So they're constantly taking in new information. Number two, that goes right in hand with that, is they have tremendous humility about what they know. They're very bright. They're very talented, but they don't show it off. They really feel like, and I think a lot of us feel this way, the more I learn, the more I realize how much more I have to learn. People, say, when are you going to stop reading? when I'm dead, because there's always more ideas. And then the last thing I think, which is really interesting, is they have a really high level of compassion for their people. They really genuinely care about people, but especially the people in their organization. So they're voracious learners, lifelong learners. They have humility, and they have a passion and concern and genuine care for the people they lead.
Isn't it so beautiful? Because despite the industry that you are from, these three things, these three traits are going to help you to be an effective leader. So how curious you are, how humble you are, and how compassionate you are towards your people.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, Dalai Lama talks a lot about compassion. And if you look at all the three traits, they come from a space of self-acceptance. They are very comfortable in who they are and the kind of work that they are doing in their life.
That's a challenge sometimes with executives, and as all of the folks listening to this know, I never take that head on. I just keep asking questions. I'll give them a phrase about something below them in the organization. For example, and this happens quite often, they'll be complaining about someone 2 levels down, a vice president, and the fact that the vice president doesn't hire good people and really has a mediocre department, and they're constantly turning over because that person just doesn't hire good. And I'll look at the CEO and go, well, who hired them? And he'll or she will look at me and go, I did. You go, okay, that's interesting.
Here you go.
And they're like,
here you go.
okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you're upset that they can't hire good, you're the one that hired them. And then there's a phrase we use a lot, which is there are no bad teams, there are only bad leaders.
Yeah.
For people take it. One of the things I try to work with my clients is to take what I call extreme ownership. That no matter what goes on in the organization, at some level, it's your fault. And like Jim Collins says, look out the window to give away credit, in the mirror to take accountability.
Yeah.
So when something goes wrong, it's your fault at some level. When something goes right, it's because your people did something right. You got out of their way.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. I often share with people, a team is a reflection of who you are as a leader.
Absolutely.
And if the team is not performing well, there's something that you have not learned how to unleash the potential that they have.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Marshall Goldsmith that uses this, but I'll say, well, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing to cause that? And I will often have, and this tells me when I have a CEO or an executive I'm working with that isn't gonna go well, they'll go, nothing, it's their fault, not mine. And I go, let me ask that question again. What do you think you might be doing to cause this? Nothing. It's not my fault, it's their fault. By about the third time, if they answer that again, I go, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Because if they can't look in the mirror and take some level of accountability, they likely never will.
Yeah. This reminds me, the other day we were having a conversation around leadership and coaching. And in that conversation, one of the leaders that I was talking to, he thought for a while. He took a long pause. He settled down in his chair, thought for a while. And then he said, Gaurav, what I'm realizing right now, one of the core responsibilities of a leader is to create a very safe space for his team members.
Yep.
And I was listening. I said, tell me more about that. And then he said, so that the team members, they don't feel any need to either blame or shame themselves.
Yep.
I said, that's so beautiful.
That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Great insight.
For me, that was like, wow. I mean, in such a simple words, he has opened a new chapter for me around leadership. How can I hold the space for my team members where there's no need for them to either blame or shame?
You said something interesting, and it's something I just put a video out on this, that 3 big things that people need in organizations from their leader and from everybody else is safety, belongingness, and appreciation.
Yeah.
I need to feel like no one's going to attack me, no one's going to make fun of me, my ideas are safe.
Yeah.
I'm part of the team, part of the tribe. They want me here, and they genuinely appreciate the work that I'm doing. And from a leadership standpoint, I believe it's your responsibility to constantly be looking at the organization and your people and saying, how can I create safety so people don't blame or shame? How can I make people feel part of the company, that we really, really care about them, and consistently give genuine, honest, sincere praise?
Precisely. Absolutely. Because In fact, I remember the last time when we were having this conversation, we spoke about the safety, security, and survival thing. And that's where the belongingness and a sense of safety came into the picture. These are the first three layers of consciousness. And unless we've been able to tap into that first three layers of consciousness, the other person would not be able to move through individuation process and move to the higher level of consciousness. So thank you so much for reminding that, John. Really appreciate that.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. If I remember very clearly, you mentioned, and specifically you asked me not to ask you this question, and then also I'm just challenging you here. What is the parallel you spoke about marriage and business coaching? So you mentioned that there are certain parallels around that, right? And you specifically asked me not to ask you this question. But I just loved it. So please go ahead.
So I'm 56 and I've been married about 20 years, and it took me about 15 years to figure out these two ideas. The first one is the one that's most important for me, and it works great in coaching or conversation or everything else, is when you start to get into an argument or whatever, or you back and forth. I always ask myself this question: do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? Do I want to prove that my point is right and I know better and I'm smarter and blah, 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 blah? Or do I just want to say, this isn't worth getting upset about? I don't care if I'm right at this. And it took a little, I guess it's ego. When I first started coaching and went into this business, I'd been running big companies and working with billionaires, and I felt pretty comfortable. I knew what I was doing. And I didn't have a problem arguing. I'll just use the word arguing with people to prove my point of view. And then one day I woke up and said, it's just my point of view. I'm not right. There is no right in this. It's one point of view, another idea, or this isn't something worth saying, I think I know this better than you. So do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And then this other one too comes great from my marriage, is where I learned it, but it works really well in coaching and everything, is what I'm going to say right now going to add any value to this conversation? And here's what I found: about 70% of the time, the answer is, I'd rather be happy, and no, I shouldn't say anything. Yeah. For family, works great, but for coaching clients, works exceedingly well too.
I'm sure. I really love the last one that you mentioned, that why am I speaking, in fact? Where's the need for me to ask this question? And when I teach people how to be effective coaches, I share this formula with them: WAIT. And WAIT stands for, why am I telling?
I've never heard that before. That is stunning. That is absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
That
Say, just wait. Why am I telling? So
that's beautiful. Yeah, I used to get caught quite a bit of telling stories to try to say, well, I know what you're doing. I know what you've been through. I've done that before. Let me tell you about the time I did blah, blah, blah. And then I realized they really don't care. Yeah. If I can summarize that all down to one or two questions and get my goal, and you'll love this, is I always try to get the other person to tell me what I want them to hear. Who do they believe above anyone else in the world? Themselves.
Yeah.
So if I can get them to say, John, I really think I need to do A, B, and C. I could have told them that an hour ago, but it's much better for them to come to that realization than me to support it. I think that's a wonderful idea. How are we going to do that together?
So there was a transition that you went through, right? From being the CEO or working in different organizations and then becoming a coach. What do you think, what was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome to become an effective coach for the executives around you?
That's a really good question. The biggest challenge was I don't like to work on life coaching, personal coaching. It's uncomfortable for me. I don't have any expertise in that. I haven't studied it a lot. I'm comfortable with multi-million-dollar business decisions, $100 million business decisions. Doesn't intimidate me at all. Having someone decide to get divorced, this is not a topic that I want to talk about. However, I do find myself pulled, because you can't separate your personal life and your business life. It's one life.
Yeah. So
I do find myself from time to time getting pulled into areas where I just say, that's not me. That's a therapist. And I'll say, I go to one. I have mentors. I have other people I go talk to when I'm struggling. I think you need that, but I'm not the person for that topic. That's the
Mm,
biggest challenge I have. And because I create really strong relationships with my clients, and I've got some that I've been friends with now for
mm,
17, 18, 19 years, and they aren't under contract anymore, but they call me to come and help out for a month or two or do
mm.
something. But they're very close family friends. But I have to keep my professional distance when I'm coaching
I
them.
understand. Yeah, yeah, and that's really important. I mean, that's one of the ethical guidelines that we have to follow as coaches. So, John, if let's say if somebody is just starting and getting into business coaching,
Mhm.
what advice would you offer to him or her?
First of all, identify specifically where you add value. Are you a life coach? Are you a discipline coach? Are you a time management coach? Are you a business coach? What area are you going to focus in to make a difference? Because no matter what kind of coaching you do, people have to see an ROI. If
Hmm.
I'm going to give you $5,000 a month or $6,000 a month, at the end of the year, I need to know that somehow my life has improved dramatically
Yeah.
to a value higher than that, or my business has. So don't try to be all things to all people. Pick a niche.
So find your
Uh,
niche. Yeah.
yeah, pick a niche and pick it in one where there's a lot of need. Um, so that would be number one is niche. Now, number two is then become insatiably curious about that topic.
Hmm.
Read everything, study everything, pick up the phone and call people and just say, I want to chat with you. I want to learn from you. And obviously you need to be extremely well prepared and not waste the other person's time, which you've been beautiful in this area. But learn from everybody. Actually, one of my really good friends, Tim Sanders, wrote a book years ago, and I'll boil the whole book down to 3 ideas. And I think it works for works for pretty much anything. He said to be successful in your career, you need 3 things: knowledge, network, and love. Knowledge. You got to be really, really good at something that's highly valuable in the marketplace.
Hmm.
You've got to have skills, abilities, ideas, frameworks, theories, whatever it might be, on something that people really want to solve and they see it as highly valuable.
Yeah.
So highly knowledgeable, something highly valuable in the marketplace. Number 2 is network. A lot of the right people need to know that about you. And by network, I mean hubs, people who, if they're really impressed with your knowledge, they don't tell a few people, they tell a few hundred or a few thousand. And that keeps you meeting more people and growing your consulting, your coaching business. And then the last one is love. If you're an honest, kind, loving person of integrity, a lot of the right people know that about you. And they also know that you're really, really good at something that's highly valuable and you're getting better every day.
Hmm.
You've set yourself up for success. So the 3 questions you have to ask yourself every day are, what did I learn today? Who did I meet today? And did I live my values today?
Hmm. So beautifully explained. Thank you. This reminds me of a year and a half back. I was speaking in a forum, and somebody asked me, Gaurav, what helped you to build your practice and establish yourself in this competitive industry that you're a part of? And I shared few very basic things. I said, fall in love with what you really care for. And what do you really care for? If you really care for people, if do you really care for technology, do you really care for adding more value? What do you really care for? Fall in love with that. The second one I spoke about is relationship. So what you were talking about networking, I said relationship. I personally feel if not for my relationship, I would not have been where I am. I mean, people have been extremely kind to me, extremely kind to me. And the third thing is go for it, no matter what. Because I remember initially when I started approaching people, approaching business houses, people would say, hey, we are looking for somebody with more experience. And I will go to them once again, and third time, and fourth time. I was like totally frustrated. What on earth are you waiting for? I've got so many years of experience in coaching. In India, there are very few people who would have this kind of experience. One fine day, this friend of mine, he said, Gaurav, let's sit. Let's have a cup of coffee. And we were having coffee. And there was some pin drop silence in the room. And then he broke the silence. He said, Gaurav, let me tell you, what we are looking for is somebody with gray hair or no hair. And look
Well,
at
I've been there.
yourself. And I said, Lord, what are you looking for? He said, Gaurav, we are looking for expertise. And according to us, our perception is expertise comes, with experience. Expertise comes 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 with experience. And that did make sense, because then that's where I started working really hard on myself. And when I'm saying hard, means I started gathering more information and started integrating that with who I was. And now what I share with people is, when you become a concept, the other person would buy you.
Yes.
If you are giving a concept, he would still buy you, but at a much economic cost.
Yeah. Well, let's talk for a second. When, as you said, when people say they want to get into coaching, when people tell me they want to do what I do for a living, I tell them there's 5 or 6 things you sort of need to have as a foundation to get to the next level, to get to a level that I'm at. And I feel strange saying that, but top something in the world. You've got to have experience. It doesn't necessarily mean in that business per se, but just experience, life experience. Certifications are awesome. Degrees, things like that. It's interesting now that I'm at my stage after doing this for 30 years, no one cares what my degree is or what certifications I've had. But early in it, it meant a lot. The next one is your network, who you know that can help you. The next one is your platform, your social media and all that. How can you get your ideas out there? Because that's important. Then the one that really I think next one is your client list, which you've got to kind of build. Another one is any awards you've won. So all of these build a foundation, my experience, my certifications, my blah, 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 my thing. But I think the thing that differentiates it at the highest level is what I call proprietary research. And this is when you create your own frameworks, your own ideas, things that they have to hire you because you're the only one that has it. So I'll give you a very quick example of how I do this. When I teach a class on leadership to a company, and I've got maybe 100 people in the room, and it's a 3/4 day class. Here's how the class runs. I begin with a lecture of about 30 to 40 minutes on my philosophy of leadership. This is what I've learned. This is what I've studied. And then I assign them about 20 or 30 minutes worth of reading. I have compiled and found the pattern and picked, let's say, 30 of the top leadership books I've ever read and put an excerpt from each one. Half a page, just the big core ideas. I let them read that, study it, and then I ask each of them to write out their own personal philosophy of leadership.
Wow.
Based on what I told them, what they read, their own life, what does an ideal leader look like? Then I put them in groups and tell them to share with each other, 8 or 10 of them. And I tell each group, when you're done, you have to come up with the top 5 characteristics that all of you agree on in your group. So I push them through that. Then I have each group present back to the entire area, the entire larger group. And as they're doing that, I'm constantly writing down what they're saying. And again, my skill at pattern recognition, after all the groups present, I will look at my notepad and go, okay, based on what all of you told me, here's 9 things that everybody in the room agrees on: honesty, teamwork, communication, whatever it is. And then, so here's the 2 parts of that. I look up and I go, does this sound like a great leader to you? And they say yes. And I go, well, this is the list you created, not me. So in your organization, then everyone should be expected to do these 9 things. This is what you hire on. This is what you coach on. This is what you promote on. And this is what you terminate on. And you told me the list, not me. Here's the second part. I have probably 600 of those lists. I put that together to create a pattern of the lists of all of those. I'm the only one in the world that has that pattern. I'm the only one that's had exposure to all that information. It's probably 50,000 people over 20 years that have answered that question for me. No one else can claim that because no one else has done it. They might have done something similarly, but now when I go to a client, they say, well, why should we trust you on teaching our people leadership? I'll go through that story and say, and I teach that pattern and how to go through, and I'll use a similar process for your folks.
Yeah.
And they go, no one has ever recommended a leadership class like that.
That's a great way of gathering information and then consolidating it and find your own traits through the research that you have done. And it's a primary research.
Yeah. And I've done that on 4 or 5 topics. So I have a handful of frameworks, patterns, ideas, things like that I can bring to the table that I'm pretty sure the folks that I'm working with haven't seen it before, the way I present it before, maybe not even before at all.
Yes. So John, who has been your role model? Somebody that you really look up to, somebody who's actually inspired you?
Living or dead or both?
Both.
Well, there would be a few, but from a learning standpoint, Leonardo da Vinci, really admire his, his ability to be a polymath, do all the things, the art and the stuff. So I've studied him deeply. The person that was my inspiration when I got into this business was Tom Peters. And at the time, when this is the early 90s, he was the most famous business guru in the world. Sort of the Jim Collins or Marshall Goldsmith of his time. And I grew up studying him, reading everything. I used to jump in planes to go fly and watch him give speeches. I mean, I figured if I could just learn enough from him and figure out what he did to get there, and do all the same stuff, I'll probably get close. So, and we are both in the top 50 in the world now. So
Absolutely.
it only took 17 years.
One of the quotes that I really love is that work so hard that your idols become your rivals. I thoroughly enjoy this quote. Every time I read that, it gives me inspiration to look up to them, model them, learn from them, and work really hard towards that.
I had told him right when I first met him, that I wanted to do what he did, and he sort of chuckled, good luck. When we ended up at the Thinkers 50, he was sitting right next to me. He was getting his Lifetime Achievement Award, and I was being recognized as one of the top 8 in the world And I told him the story again, and he's like, I remember you. And he goes, you caught me.
Wow.
But that was come full circle to end up at the head table with the person that I grew up. And when I say grew up, I was in my 30s, and he was only in his more 40s or 50s. He's only about 10 years older than me.
Yeah.
Was a pretty neat experience. And as you said, speaks well of the idea of constant learning, curiosity, humility, trying to get all those things in pursuit of someone I won't say idolized, but someone I really looked up to.
Yeah. And must be very humbling as well to share the table with somebody that you have always admired, somebody you idealize, and then must be very, very humbling.
Humbling and surreal.
I'm sure.
Just not something I thought would ever happen in my wildest dreams. So extremely humbling.
Yeah. Thank you, John, for sharing that.
My pleasure. My honor.
John, here's the last question. Let's say if you were to restart your journey from scratch, what would you do differently?
I would have learned much earlier to trust my instincts about people not to coach. I wasted a lot of time and energy and effort trying to help people that did not want help. It paid well. Oftentimes I gave the money back, but it really pushed me away from coaching for about 10 years. I just didn't do any hardly at all because it was so draining and so frustrating to be trying to help someone and them having no desire whatsoever to be helped. And again, it was because usually the CEO assigned me to someone lower in the organization. So if I had learned not to do that and only been coaching good people that wanted to get better, I would have been light years ahead of where I am now.
Yeah.
And it would have been a lot more fun.
Absolutely, I'm sure.
Not fun to work with people that don't want to work with you.
Yeah. So thank you so much, John. I think it was absolutely a pleasure having you in this conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed as always. Loved every bit of it and learned a lot. So thank you so much for
and I learned
inspiring
a lot from
always.
You too. I've got some big ideas I can take away from this. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much.